Hello everyone and welcome to Now You're Playing with Power, a Nintendo podcast. This is episode 6. It's been a few months now since we've been doing this, and we're well into our stride on this podcast.
It has officially become a thing.
It has, and that you hear the voice that overbred mine is my co-host. It's Bally. Bally, how you doing this week?
I'm good. I'm 3 pints down, so we'll try again.
We will try. We'll try and push past the insobriety of my co-host.
This always happens. I'm honestly not that bad, people, but you know.
It's a reoccurring theme. We'll get you help. Don't worry about it. It's okay. But video games will help. That'll be good. So we got a game. We've got a show packed with the video games for you, and we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. So Bally, how about you outline the show and the segments that we have coming up today?
Okay, so we're going to open up with what we've been playing, then we're going to do a bit of your emails, and then to finish off, we are going to talk about Nintendo and sort of where they go for the future, because I'm sure, as everyone knows, with all the press about this, Nintendo and especially Wii U is really not doing so hot right now, so we're going to have a little chat about that a bit later.
Definitely, NPDs and everything coming out, and just doom and gloom everywhere. But yeah, we'll dive into some of that chat later on. But we are going to kick it off, of course, as we do every week, with some what we've been playing. And I'm going to start this time. And I'm going to talk about two games which are very related to each other, and they are The Wolf Among Us and The Walking Dead Season 2. Both of these games from Telltale, who have had a pretty spotty record in the past when it comes to video games. There's a lot of older titles that were well regarded from them, and then they had like Back to the Future, which was okay, Jurassic Park, which was apparently a fucking train wreck, and now we have the new Telltale, as a lot of people are calling them, with this very new style of adventure game, which is very dialogue-driven and text-tree-driven, but is just fantastic because it's essentially a choose-your-own adventure, like your own kind of visual novel, but it's played out so much more interestingly, and gives you really tough choices and very dark storylines. And so I basically these episodes, I mean, The Wolf Among Us actually came out back in maybe October or so, and it's been a long time waiting on the second episode for most people, but I only just recently picked it up in the Steam sale, and I mean, maybe I should talk about The Walking Dead first, because that kind of gives more of context, seeing as that was, the first season they've already finished of that. And so, like, this is a game that I really fucking plowed my way through, because by the time I played it at the very end of last year, when I say last year, I mean 2012. It's going to be hard, man, getting into the groove of
Happy New Year!
It's tough, but I mean, like, at the end of 2012? Yeah, 2012. End of 2012 is when I played the Walking Dead game. And, yeah, by then all the episodes were out, and I basically just, in a single week, went through one a day, one episode per day, and plowed through, which I think is a fantastic way to experience that game, because just the nature of it being episodic and having cliffhangers and that kind of thing.
How many episodes were there?
There were 5 episodes, and that is the structure that Telltale take for all of their games. 5 episodes released, over the period of, not a few months, but
5 years.
Yeah, it may be that way with The Wolf Among Us. It's taken this long, but yeah, it's just over the course of like the year, I guess, really, and it's a little bit unfortunate that I got hooked on it then, and now I'm into the cycle, because now I have to wait. I'm one of the
you
one of those,
caught up.
I know, it's like when you catch up on Breaking Bad like I did, and you get to the point where you have to wait another year for the final part of the 5th season, which was just agonizing. Oh my lord, I can't tell you. People watching Breaking Bad now, very good time. They can go through the entire thing in one, which I would.
We're in that period for Game of Thrones, definitely. It's a struggle.
Yeah, it is. But that's the feeling I get really right now. It's like, oh man, this is really good. I want to see where this is going. And so, I mean, the story is the main focus here. The story is the driving point, and that's the entire premise of the game. There are other parts of it, like there are some minor combat, but that is essentially QTEs. It's just button prompts whenever you see it's like, mash this button really quick as hard as you can, or like hold this button and then hold this button and then hold this button and make sure you're holding them all down at the same time. That kind of thing, which isn't, I mean, it's the best way to do it interactively. And I mean, I make a big comparison to these games in Heavy Rain, which of course I LP'd on my channel. Because it's just all about the narrative. The narrative is the overarching thing here, and it was very clear in season 1 where the narrative was going. You were playing as Lee, and you were looking after this young girl Clementine, and you basically were attempting to try and find her parents, basically, and try and go to where they were. That was kind of the driving narrative force behind that season. And this season, it's not quite clear what they're doing. I mean, Clem is a lot older. Not significantly so, but they've done a really good job of subtly making her her voice a little bit more mature, and making her just look a slight bit older than she was in the previous season, which is really a tough thing to do, I have to say, like, especially for the voice actor to make such a subtle change in the tone of the voice and keep it that way. Really cool. I actually saw an interview with her somewhere on YouTube, which I can't quite remember where. But it's always interesting to hear about those kind of behind the scenes things. And yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to see where the season is going, because she's basically thrown in. I mean, you saw this, Bally, because you were watching me play.
So that was episode 2 I saw.
No, it was episode 1 that you saw.
Oh, episode 1, okay.
Yeah, because episode 2's not out yet.
Oh, so I'm right up to date in some ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I only saw episode 1 of season 2 of The Walking Dead. Yes, okay, yeah. No, I absolutely loved it. It was really enticing, and I wasn't even playing it at all. I was just watching, and I was looking away at points, and like I could not handle the gore at times because I'm a massive girl's blouse about something. And then at other times I was hooked, and I was watching, and I was like, oh, are you gonna save that guy with this? I won't give anything away, but like, yeah, it was really, really good. I really enjoyed even watching it, not even playing it.
Yeah, I think that's where some people would bring up the flaws with this style of gameplay, is that it's very much verging on not being a game.
Yeah, that's what I felt as well. I thought, this counts as an action game, like.
Well, it's not really. It's when I say adventure game.
Adventure game, sorry.
It's used in the traditional sense of adventure game. I mean, old adventure games were called point and click, which is basically PC based essentially, and you had your mouse and you clicked on things and your character would move towards them. That kind of like old school idea, but much more modernized, much more modernized, because there's so little focus on things like puzzles. I mean, there was like one kind of puzzle, I guess you could say, in the first episode of season 2, where you're kind of going around and looking for items to, you know, make this thing and just help yourself out, essentially, because you're in a bit of a bad situation. And that's kind of the extent of it, honestly. It doesn't really go that much further than that. But yeah, no, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with these new characters. There's a whole new set of characters, like 7 or 8 brand new ones, so it's going to be interesting to see their development over the rest of the season. I really look forward to that. And so I guess The Wolf Among Us, comparative to it, is very similar in the style, because it's just the same engine and everything. And I will actually talk about the technical difficulties, because when I play on PS3, it seems that Telltale's engine just can't really handle it for some reason. It chugs between loading areas, and there will be points at which you can hear what's happening, but you can't see anything because the game hasn't fucking loaded yet. It's really annoying sometimes, because there'll be a crucial scene happening, and it will, like, people's voices will be going off, and it will be stuck on a black screen, and you're like, Jesus, I don't want to miss this. This is, like, the core point of playing this game. And so it's really annoying in that way. But I bought The Wolf Among Us on PC, and I resolved to play the entirety of it on that platform. And not only does it look so much better because it's running at 1080, but there's no technical hiccups, none whatsoever. It plays smooth as butter, and that's really like the only issue that I have with these Telltale games is that they have the technical hiccups, but there aren't any on PC, which is absolutely fantastic and definitely the best experience. There's no doubt about that. And The Wolf Among Us, in terms of being a dark story, is no less dark than The Walking Dead. I mean, it's set in a universe where Fables, it's based on this comic book series called Fables, where, you know, well-known fairy tale characters like the Big Bad Wolf and like Snow White and that kind of thing are all thrust into the real world, and they have to adapt real-world personas, things which they called glamours, which is essentially like a cover. Like the Big Bad Wolf is just like looks like a random guy, and he's basically using that as a disguise almost. And so you play as him, the main driving point behind this story is a lot clearer because it's a murder mystery essentially. Very near the start of the game, someone is murdered, and you find like them just kind of dead on the floor, and you're like, okay, well, who's behind this? What's going on? You're chasing down suspects, and you're going to different areas, and all very interesting stuff.
What did you mean by like a cover? How did they hide themselves?
Well, it's not really explained in the first episode. I'm sure the comics explain it in some way, but I guess you could think of it as, you know, like Polyjuice Potion from Harry Potter.
All right, a little bit magical and weird. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, very magical. Okay. Like, I mean, there's a character at the beginning who's the frog. I can't remember what like fable he's from, but he's like talking about how he doesn't have enough.
Princess and the Frog.
Maybe, yeah. He's talking about how much he doesn't have enough money to afford a glamour, so he's literally just a walking frog. Like, he doesn't look like a human, he's just a frog, which is kind of funny. And he's a pretty foul-mouthed individual, I'll say that as well. These games are on the adult end in terms of language, I have to say, shouting out some pretty nasty stuff. I feel like this story is much more established in terms of where it's going to go. Like, because it's a murder mystery.
Okay.
Yeah, because you don't really know what's going to happen with Walking Dead, because Walking Dead has always been about, like, surviving. There's no kind of main villain or anything introduced right at this point, so I don't know what they're going to do with that story, whereas Wolf Among Us, I feel much more secure in how they're going to take it and what areas they're going to take it.
That was the next question I was going to ask was, I know you've only played one episode of Wolf Among Us, but what's the better story?
I definitely feel much more hooked in by The Wolf Among Us, just because, as I said, as a murder mystery, it's much more interesting. You already have multiple suspects who could potentially be linked to it, and there's this whole world of like fairy tales. It's really, really fascinating because you just notice, like, wait a second, that's like that person from this old tale, and
that's cool.
It's kind of cool.
And Heavy Rain was effectively a murder mystery as well, wasn't it? So like,
yeah, exactly. It's those kind of stories.
It's quite a classic almost style. Like, that's been going on for hundreds of years. Murder mysteries and things like they're just kind of reincorporating this now into video games.
Yeah. It's definitely got a very like noir style to it, like a classic kind of murder mystery, and I'm definitely much more intrigued, let's say, about The Wolf Among Us. So definitely both of those should be on your radar if you have a PS3 or 360 or even a PC. I'd say jump in and go and try.
Or an iPad.
That's actually, you know what, not many people bring up the fact that this game is also on iOS, and apparently it runs really well on iOS, at least the first season of The Walking Dead did. I heard some issues about the more recent seasons, but yeah, no, it's definitely a very valid place to play this game because it doesn't require any kind of joystick or anything. It very easily works on a touchscreen, so yeah. Definitely, if you can, even you could play at Bali potentially, because I know that you have access to an iPad at times. So
True.
There you go, excellent. Alrighty, so that is going to be what I've been playing. I've also been playing Mario 3D World, but you're going to mention that, so I'll jump into that discussion when we talk.
So I'll start with a bit of 3D World. I guess both of us have been playing this quite a bit recently, over the sort of Christmas New Year break, and now throughout January.
Not quite that far into the year.
January. Yeah. So I might be a bit spoilery in what I'm saying, so if you don't want to know some of the levels and maybe some of the power-ups and things you get near the end of the game, maybe skip 7 minutes, would you say?
Yeah,
Should we
sure.
go with that? Yeah, so skip 7 minutes or so. But yeah, so I'm right at the end of the game-ish, although I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty much where you are, aren't I, MBZ?
Yeah, it's
Flower
the
World.
the third bonus world, I believe it is, and this is where the game really ramps up its difficulty. And the get not only getting through this, getting the stars is a tough thing. Like that's made even harder. Just getting through the levels themselves starts to become a
Yeah.
real
And then,
hassle.
like, I'm playing to obvious, like, I'm up to the second level of Flower World, and up to that point, I've done 100% of the entire game. So I've literally gone through every level so far, getting everything. And I must say that, like, the last 12, 15, 20 or so levels have been a real slog. Like, I've really struggled with a few of them to get all the stars and just constant deaths. I had to go back and do the Koopa trick with the Koopa shell again to get like infinite lives, just to keep those racked up nice and high, so that I could ensure that I could die a few times. Um, but a couple of points I'd like to make about the near the end of the game. First of all, sort of the final boss with Bowser and yeah, if you didn't know, by the way, the final boss is Bowser for this game. Um,
Spoil. Oh, I mean, who could
massive
have
spoiler.
even thought it?
But I just really like what they did with that specific stage. So I, I guess the people who are listening now have already seen it, or they're spoiling it for them. But I'll describe it either way, and that is that Bowser takes on the cat suit, and on top of that, he takes on the cherry item, which is double cherry, which is amazing because there's this massive, rather than it being a castle or anything generic like that, it's an actual skyscraper, and I'm just really impressed that they went with something new and fresh. And rather than the boss battle being this awkward jumping around Bowser, flinging him or ground pounding him, it ignores all that. You just have to get to the end of the level, hit the power block a few times, and you destroy him. And I just like that they, like 3D Land, they just went for the platforming here and ignored the whole idea of facing off with a boss, because that's a one point in this game I'd say is quite weak, is some of the boss battles. They're just some nice ideas, definitely, but they're just a little bit simplistic. There's not enough platforming. Some of the hitboxes really annoy me at times on certain bosses, and just lining it up right. And but they really nailed it with this final stage, and
Yeah,
I'm really glad.
I think that EAD Tokyo have one really good boss battle in them every game they do, and that's
Yeah,
generally the final fight.
and the music's amazing, by the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing I like about that is that they really incorporate the idea of the catsuit into the final level. If you have a catsuit going into that boss fight, then it's going to be a lot more fluid because it is vertical. It is
Yeah.
100% up and down and platforming.
Bowser in his cat suit looks more like a tiger, and just in HD, it just looks really crisp, and they
I
just
think
nail it.
going up to that boss battle when the rain is falling, I think that's one of the
Oh,
best looking parts of that game. Oh my lord, the rain on the floor and on the camera. I think that is a fantastic scene. And definitely just proves the power of what you can do with the system visually, which is really nice.
like it
Definitely.
feels like they've just really tried with this specific level. I'll admit that there's a few levels throughout 3D World that are a little lackluster at times, but you can just tell that they were like, right, let's have a brainstorming sesh for the final battle. What can people come up with? And they literally took the best of the best ideas and refined them and edited them and made sure that this final battle with Bowser for their big Mario game at this point in time was going to be amazing. And they really hit the nail on the head with that one.
Most definitely.
But yeah, other than the final battle, I love that there's just literally about 30, at least 30 levels after the final battle that really ramp up the difficulty and give you plenty of more 3D Mario platforming to play through. And I'm just quite surprised at the amount of content in this game, to be honest. I mean, I must be up to about 22, 23 hours by now. And I'm going to take another few hours to finish this game for sure. And I'm just like, that is longer than 3D Land by quite some way, I would say. Another
I
point.
think I
Sorry,
think
go
that they
ahead.
have quite a few more levels per world in this game, which is why they don't have as many worlds. But it probably works out more levels in the long run, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing I really like compared to 3D Land is that I'll admit that, and you were saying this, that there are some slightly recycled levels, a bit like 3D Land, where they take the level and make an aspect of it more difficult, or add enemies, or reduce
Mm,
the time, or something like that. I feel like the levels they edited in that way, they did far more to change them up than they did with 3D Land, and they feel far more unique. And it literally took you to tell me that they're actually kind of rehashed levels, because I really, maybe because I'd played them quite long ago, but I really didn't really notice that they were rehashed levels for
sure.
some of them at least.
Yeah, I mean, with 3D Land, a lot of it was like putting an extra time constraint or running away from a Shadow Mario, but in the same level. Like here, they really do take efforts to change the structure and, in some ways, the visual aspects of the level as well. So that's really cool and definitely appreciated because if you're going through levels again at a harder difficulty, it's nice to see something new as opposed to what is essentially recycled. So that's good.
But I must admit that throughout the middle of the game, I was thinking, this is a great game. It is nowhere near my favorite 3D Mario game, and I really think that the end game is saving it massively. I think that everything from that final Bowser battle, and including that final Bowser battle, has upped my
Opinion.
opinion of this game completely, and I would really rate it up there with probably my favorite 3D Mario game would be Galaxy 1.
Hmm.
Maybe, I don't know, I've not really thought about that enough, but this is definitely up there with that because it just looks incredible. They really try to improve and be unique in the final Bowser battle, like we've already said, and also those extra levels at the end are just fantastic. Love it. Um, so yeah, that's 3D World. I don't know if it will come up again in future pods, but we've certainly both got a few more hours to play of it, so we'll probably have to mention it at some point in the future. But I'm going to now move on to the other game that I've been playing, and I've actually completed this game. Um,
Yes, so
not
happy.
100%, but I completed the story. And that game is Metroid Fusion, as I've already talked about on this pod. And as
So, Bali, how does it feel to have played and completed a Metroid game, one of Nintendo's most beloved
it
franchises?
was really good, really streamlined, tough, but enjoyable and not overly tough. And I must admit that I barely, by the end of the game, it said that I'd only collected 33% of everything that there is to collect in the game. So I only had maybe about just under 50% of all the life
Energy tanks?
energy tanks terminology energy
Yep.
tanks that you can collect in the game. So I actually defeated most of these final bosses with very little energy, and I must admit that it took quite a number of times, probably because of that. But
But did you
yeah,
feel like when you were at the end game and you were going through these bosses again and again because they were so tough, you started to develop like techniques and tactics to get around them and to be able
absolutely.
to beat them?
I'd say that I wouldn't say that the final few bosses are the toughest boss, but I'd say that the specific boss where you fight the SAX when it's on foot with you, like the same size as you. Um, Absolutely, I think that's probably in the top three for difficulty of bosses in the game. And I definitely had to develop a technique on how to defeat that boss. And Yeah, it must have taken me 5, 6 times at least.
That's not bad. 5 or 6 times is really good. I remember I was sitting in. I actually remember this really vividly. I was sitting in a car on the way to my grandparents' house in London, um, and I was on the final boss, and I had gone up against it like so many times, like 15, 16, like loads and loads of times. And I was sitting there in the car, and I finally did it. And then I got to the point where you get to the actual final boss. I ended up dying, but I went through again and then finished the game. And my sister like took this picture of me after I'd finished. I was like, I beat Metroid Fusion.
And how old were you?
I think maybe 14 or 13.
Good
I can't
effort,
remember.
because like I don't think I'm generally a very good gamer in the sense that I don't think I have many gamer skills. There aren't a whole lot of games that I would consider myself actually quite good at. Maybe stuff like Mario Kart, but like that's not even much of a it's nothing it's not at all an adventure game, and like you know that I struggled with even like Skyward Sword, and like I'm not that much of a gamer, and like completing this is honestly one of the toughest gaming things I've done. Now there'll be lots of speedrunners out there and people who will just be like, "Oh, this is an easy game. Why? How come we can't?" But like, I found it really tough, really tough.
Yeah. I'm really very very happy that you not only decided to play this game and went through it, but actually finished it.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. I'm so happy about that. And not only that, you actually have Super Metroid on Wii
Yes.
U.
I will play Super Metroid in the next few months for sure. Because I have it. I bought it for 99p when it was on the Super NES offers. On my Wii U, and that's sitting there ready to go. But I was just gonna say that I was just watching some Metroid retrospective on YouTube because I got a bit obsessed with the story and stuff, which I actually really liked in Fusion. I really enjoyed the story, so I was just watching a bit. Um, and I was just watching some screens of Zero Mission, and it looks awesome. Like I really want to play Zero Mission. Um,
Dude, this is why Nintendo need to release GBA games
and
on the
yeah,
eShop.
I would happily pay up to £8 to £9 for Zero Mission on my 3DS. I mean, honestly, like Nintendo, just get on and put GBA games on the 3DS or even the Wii U, because there are plenty of Nintendo fans like me ready to go, and I'd love to give Zero Mission a go, as I would love to give Super Metroid a go, which I'm going to get on with.
Yeah.
And now I'm thoroughly in your camp, MBZ, for a 2D Metroid on either Wii U or 3DS for the future. Like
I
I'm.
mean, come on, it has
Come
to
on,
happen.
where is it?
Jesus Christ, spike the mic, why don't you?
Yeah,
Oh
sorry.
my lord.
But overall, like, really enjoyed the game. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did, to be honest. And it's a good length of a game. There must be about maybe 12 to 14 bosses or so, and it's relatively linear, but at the same time, near the end of the game, it feels far more expansive, and you can go back to the specific sectors and collect all the bits and do 100%. And maybe I might do that at some point when I have the time. But
It's
for
definitely much, much easier to explore once you've beaten Ridley because you get access to the screw attack, and that just fucking changes everything. It
exactly.
completely changes the way you play the game, the way you traverse the environments. There's no more kind of waiting in rooms for enemies to die. You just jump at them and they're gone. So if you were to go back and 100% it, it would be a much more relaxed
Yeah,
experience, I
and
would
that's
say.
something I loved about this game, was the constant feeling of, oh, I defeated the boss. I'm more powerful. Look at what I've got. Look, I've got this super bomb. I've got this laser that goes through enemies, and it's really satisfying.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and it's really like a, I know it's 2D and sprite based, but it's a really good looking game for like what was it, 2002? Like
Oh
it just
yeah,
feel it's really streamlined. It's smooth. It's
so colorful, so
really
colorful.
great game.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm sure that we will talk about 2D Metroid in the future,
If
but
we don't, there's something wrong with me.
yeah, exactly. But for now, yep, completed Fusion, great game. I'm moving on to Fire Emblem Sacred Stones. I'm doing a bit more of that, and I'm
Excellent.
also gonna finish off 3D World. But yeah, that's what I've been playing,
All right.
and I think we're gonna head on to, I was going to say Sector 2, Part 2.
Keeping in vein with Metroid Fusion.
Exactly. Keep up the theme. So, yeah, I think we're going to head on over to Part 2, and we're going to do a bit of your questions from our
Indeed.
emails.
So join us after the music break when we will do just that. And we are back with some more of this show, and jumping into Sector 2, as we've been calling it, we're going to address some of the emails that you have sent to us. The email address, of course, is nyppquestions@gmail.com, and Bally has the first email.
Okay, so this one is from Saint, and he says, "Hi again. First, thanks for the platformer suggestions last time. Got Donkey Kong Country and I love it. But how do you guys deal with these rocket levels? Those are super frustrating. And Bally, how did you feel about the mechanics of Phantom Hourglass? I like the story but not really fond of the controls. Have you guys ever thought about doing collab LPs? I think you guys would be great. Lastly, you keep praising the 3D on a lot of games, and for whatever reason, I never seem to really enjoy it all that much. I'm wondering if maybe I just don't have the right games for it, or maybe I just suck at holding the 3DS right. Suggestions? Keep up the good work, guys." Right, so yeah, a number of questions there. So I'll reread the very first question. So I don't personally own this game, but NBZ, how did you deal with those rocket levels?
Talking about Donkey Kong Country Returns, which I played on 3DS, which I think is the preferable way to play it, mainly because there's no shoved-in motion controls like they did on the Wii version, and so he's talking about like these rocket barrel levels where you're basically using one button to control the upward and downward momentum of a rocket barrel as it goes through a linear level. And they are really, really difficult. Like, they get super fucking hard. Not that that's unrepresentative of the whole game, because the entire game is extremely hard as well. But some of those can be super frustrating. I definitely get where he's coming from, because I had so many times when I would just die again and again and again. And it's just like the struggle to get to the checkpoint. That's like, all you're trying to do is just make it to the checkpoint and then go from there. And sometimes it just became extremely, extremely hard. I completed Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D over the course of a week. I basically played like one world each night and went through it that way. So it didn't take me overly long. Like, I wasn't hung up over those levels, and I wasn't getting super duper frustrated. But I definitely understand his pain, and I can sympathize mostly with that.
I must say, from what I've seen, they looked a bit tricky. So yeah. Shall we move on to the next question?
Yes.
Okay, so the next part of his question it's directed at me. And Bally, how did you feel about the mechanics of Phantom Hourglass? I like the story, but not really fond of the controls. So, we can both answer this one, I'm sure.
Definitely. You go
so
first.
I really at first liked the mechanics of Phantom Hourglass, and when you're talking about mechanics, I'm assuming you're meaning the controls.
The touchscreen controls.
Yeah. So, but over time, I really hated them, and I must admit, I was happy enough to play both Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, regardless of the mechanics, because I thought some of the puzzles, maybe even the story, other aspects of the game were really great. The dungeons are pretty cool. The music's great, but I just really, really don't like swinging my sword by tapping the screen.
I think that's the real key point here.
Exactly.
The sword play was such a weak element in that game. I'm definitely all for using it to control, for example, the boomerang. I think that was a fantastic implementation of how they use the touchscreen.
There's loads of weapons that are awesome with the touchscreen, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's just mainly the swordplay that was the weak point there, and seeing as Zelda is a game which is largely predicated on that aspect, it was a letdown. I feel.
I think that so Jeff Ganata from Weekend Confirmed, I think, talked about this quite a while ago. He said, and he's talking about rethinking video games and how can video games be unique and reinvent themselves. And one of his suggestions was, what if you had a Zelda without a sword? And I was just like, wow, like that'd be cool. And then I thought to myself, actually, something like Phantom of Hourglass or Spirit Tracks could easily have been done without a sword, because there are a few bosses, especially at the end of Spirit Tracks. I really, really hated that final boss, but you literally have to use your sword all the time, and it's just a dodgy mechanic. And why? I love the other weapons, don't get me wrong, but just the sword and the touchscreen just does not go.
Yeah, I think that's a very salient point, and one that could be applied to a lot of games, most notably, shooters. Like that's a mechanic that a lot of people have grown tired of, and trying to find a way out of that kind of genre is very difficult. And how would you do combat like that in a different way? But it would be definitely an interesting thing to address, and maybe it'll happen someday, but we'll have to see.
And I mean, the fact that they had a touchscreen device with the 3DS but decided to go with hardly any touchscreen, well, none in terms of combat or action, shows that maybe they accepted it wasn't great to use yet again for a third time. So
I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that the main experience is being viewed on the 3D screen, and kind of disconnecting there by using the touchscreen and the 3D.
Yeah.
Something that they did in Kid Icarus, for example, but that's a very unique case, and it doesn't really work in many other scenarios. So, yeah.
Next question?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Right, so now he's saying, have you ever guys thought about doing collab LPs? We actually never have we?
No, I've never considered that as an option, mainly because being not like I would prefer to do those in person, but it's a very hard thing to do when we're kind of not in the same place a lot of the time.
I mean, I assume that he's implying sort of a cooperative LP.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like we're both playing the game rather than one of us watching and commenting. But the simple answer is we're at uni at different parts of the country, and it's just not possible for us to play together in that way unless it was online.
And that's the point that we could come to, because most cooperative games that are Nintendo based are not online.
Yeah.
I would love to do. I would probably go out and buy Super Mario Brothers U for Wii U if it had online co-op, because I think that would be a fantastic thing to play online. Same with 3D World. I would gladly play through 3D World online with you. But that's just something we can't do, and it's a real shame.
Yeah, and I mean, it is something that we would happily do, but just do not have the time or the abilities or the games, partly because of Nintendo, to do it. But you never know. You never know for the future.
It's always
maybe.
a possibility. Never rule anything out. It is the internet, of course. So.
Absolutely. We will not rule that out for the future. So, moving on again. You keep praising the 3D on a lot of games, and for whatever reason, I never seem to really enjoy it all that much. I'm wondering if maybe I just don't have the right games for it, or maybe I just suck at holding a 3DS right. What are your suggestions? Do you want to hit this one first?
I think that a lot of it is personal preference, and I know that lots of people play the 3DS with the 3D turned off exclusively, and fair enough. I mean, you're entitled to that opinion, but I think that it's only very specific instances where the 3D is a must-have, and those I would say Super Mario 3D Land and Link Between Worlds. There are definitely other games that make good use of it, and it's just a nice visual add-on. But if you go and play 3D Land and Link Between Worlds and tell me that the 3D isn't effective or good in any way,
you're doing it wrong.
Then I would just say that you're a lost cause, and it's just it's not for you. And fair enough. If it's not for you, it's not for you. And I don't know if you've played those games or not, but those are really the testing ground, in all honesty, as to how 3D is implemented into games. Would you
Yeah, I
agree with that,
mean,
Ollie?
I would agree. My first experience of the 3DS was Pilot Wings Resort, and
Oh, right. That is actually a fantastic example, I
it,
would say.
it well, in two ways. First of all, initially it looks absolutely amazing. The only issue I would have with it in terms of 3D is that sometimes in dark areas or where there's a lot of balloons or different items, you get a lot of what do we call it? Waving.
Ghosting.
Ghosting.
Yeah.
Waving? Ghosting, yeah. So ghosting when ghost images appear, and that's even when you're holding it in exactly the right angle and you're exactly the right distance away from the 3DS. Even then, in certain areas of that game, you get ghosting. But I completely agree with you with 3D Land and Link Between Worlds that in those games there's no ghosting that I personally got. And at
No.
the same time, the 3D just it's almost like a luxury. It just makes everything look amazing, and it's really difficult to describe. And for anyone out there who's not played a 3DS on with one of those two games, just honestly try it, because if you hold the three, and I do think that you do have to definitely hold the 3DS at the right angle and the right distance away from your face. But if you can get used to the position you hold it in, and you play one of those two games, both those games just look amazing. And I'm sure there are many more 3DS games that look fantastic. I mean,
It's really just an enhanced experience, and I kind of liken it to, HD, I guess, like a switch from SD to HD. Like it's that visual upgrade that makes the game just more enjoyable to look at and to enjoy. So, yes,
and I mean, with Nintendo now having the 2DS, I'm guessing that they're gonna phase it out maybe soon. But I guess that's another question for another time.
that's true. All right.
Okay, so
So,
now we have a question from Meowth900 again.
ardent listener.
Our number one fan. Well, maybe
Indeed.
that's a much
Hotly debated
hotly debated
position.
topic, which I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll get to at some point. But they
Yeah.
say, hello, it's 2014 pretty much, and I'm all caught up on my anime simulcasts. I'm still waiting for Bravely Default, but you lucky bastards in the UK don't care because you already have it. My question is, do you guys watch anime? If yes, do you have any favorite, and do you prefer English dubs or Japanese with English subtitles? If no, why not, and would you ever watch anime?
Okay. Um, let's talk about how you and I sat on Skype one night and watched through a video of every single Pokemon anime ever intro.
So for anyone who's like in their early 20s, even late teens, I think this is like quite a fun experience that you should try. And that's for anyone who doesn't watch the Pokemon anime anymore, where you just go on YouTube, you look up like the anime song intros for Pokemon, and there are these compilation videos that just beautifully they stitch all the songs together throughout the series across about how many seasons? At least
Like
20 seasons.
it's a lot. It's like
It
15, I would say.
15, yeah. So it's just from the number one very first song to the latest, and it just plays them little snippets back to back. And if you want a nostalgia trip, I would highly recommend it, because it was great fun. And like
Yeah.
we both had like certain points where we were like, oh, I remember this, and oh, I've never heard this one. And then some of the more recent ones just sound crazy.
Some of the recent ones just sound bad. I have to say it. They sound bad. I don't like them.
They're a
But I
bit
guess that's
they're a
just,
bit modern, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. We're not down with the kids anymore, Bally. Not down with
I
the
know, it
kids.
feels and yeah, if you're like early 20s, it will make you feel really old, like really
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
I've never felt so old.
It's great though. It's great. But
So
in
I
terms
guess
of
that
actual anime,
yeah,
I would say like we watched a lot of Digimon
a
back in
lot.
the day. Like I personally feel that Digimon is the superior anime to Pokemon by quite a margin. Like it just has a much more interesting story to tell, and there's
Says the
much
says the man with with the massively popular Pokemon channel.
Yeah, no, but I mean, come the fuck on. You know that the Pokemon anime is
Oh
utter
no, I agree.
bullshit.
I agree.
Like the anime of Pokemon is so it's a formulaic. It's like every episode you go do a thing, Team Rocket shows up, then they blast off. Like that's Pokemon anime. Every episode in a nutshell. Digimon had like an overarching plot and like an end point, and there was somewhere where they were going that was much more interesting than just trotting through towns and beating gym leaders. It was just a much more well realized story, I would say in general. And I remember just like saying that we spent ages watching Digimon. It was great. Do you remember that? Like just sitting in your front room.
It was really good and wasn't generic like Pokemon, and there's just more action, and the process of digivolving just worked really well in an anime compared to evolving, which was like a one-time thing. And Charmander evolved into Charmeleon, great.
Never go back again.
Yeah. Whereas this process of digivolving, where like multiple Digimon would digivolve multiple times in one episode, it was
and
just
then fuse together and stuff. It was great. It was so cool.
Yeah, the series really evolved nicely and just really, really good.
Yeah. I should go back one day and have a look at some of those episodes.
Exactly. And I guess we have to admit that beyond Pokemon and Digimon, we're not fully...
I am.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I mean, I watched like the most popular, most generic anime out there, Dragon Ball Z. I guess aside from Naruto, like...
How much Naruto did you watch?
I never watched Naruto. I'm just saying aside, like Dragon Ball Z is in terms of popularity.
Shout out Sally T.
Shout out to Ali T. Sat through and watched like 500 episodes of Naruto for some goddamn reason I don't know. I watched a lot of Dragon Ball Z when I was younger, loads of it, because it was always on Cartoon Network, and we didn't have Cartoon Network at my house, so I would have to, every time we went down to London to visit family, that would be my like couple of weeks or so every year where I'd get to watch Cartoon Network and catch up on Dragon Ball Z to the extent that I could, because I would have missed loads of episodes not being down and stuff. But I love Dragon Ball Z to this day. I think it's a fantastic anime, and it's just one of those touchstones. Most people have seen it and know the characters, and the people I talk to online and everything, and they all know Dragon Ball Z well, and it's just one of those. I guess it's like a water cooler anime, as you would say. Like it's one of those things that everyone talks about. Which is awesome. The other one, which is a little bit more obscure, is called Card Captors. And this was a TV show, an anime that was on ITV, CITV, when I was younger. And it was
I've got one. I've got a good shout after you.
Okay.
Go, sorry.
Well, it was on in the afternoon, and I think it's called Card Captor Sakura in Japanese. But it's just basically about this girl who opens this magical book one day, and all these cards fly out into the world, and her task is to basically go and capture them back and seal them away. And every time she captures one, it becomes like under her control. It's very similar to Pokemon in a way, because she like every episode catches a new one and has a new power with which she can use to capture the other ones, and then I guess the story kind of escalates. And I actually went through the process relatively recently of starting to watch back through it and trying to watch the entire thing, because the entire series is only about 70 episodes, so I watched about 30 of them and then kind of stopped. But I want to go back and finish it, because I never finished it when I was younger, and I think I kind of owe that debt to myself, so I think I will do that. Bali, what were you going to mention?
I was going to say that I watched, and I really don't know how much you watched of this, because this was very much a Sky One Sunday morning thing that was in and around Pokemon at the time, and that was Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, right, I did watch Yu-Gi-Oh!
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So, like, I watched quite a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Sort of without even meaning to, almost. It was like that kind of buffer thing that was on before Pokemon that I'd watch, and it was pretty good. And in all reality, in all seriousness, it was probably better than Pokemon.
Look, every anime is better than Pokemon. It doesn't matter what it is, it's better.
Yeah, so like, I loved the whole card thing, and like years and years and years later, I am now like quite a keen sort of board tabletop hobby board gamer who's quite keen
Mm.
on a few card games, and it's quite, I don't know, it's just I never played many card games at the time, but like I really enjoyed watching it and just seeing all the. It's a nice idea that there were these cards you would play and then they would become monsters. It was a cool idea, and he
Yeah.
actually had like the deck on his arm, like
Oh,
it
it
was
was
just
so cool at the
Yeah,
time, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's definitely another one I'll mention, which is a little after our time, was Beyblade, because I never really got into that. That was a big like toy thing as well as an anime, but I just didn't give a fuck at that point. I'd moved on. So I guess that's just another notable mention.
Yeah, Beyblade.
Yeah, and the other part of her question was asking whether we watched in English dubs or with Japanese subtitles.
Oh.
Majority of these are English dubbed. I'm not sure what your opinion is on the voice acting in these kind of things, Bali. Whether you find it cringeworthy and whether you would prefer like watching a Japanese version and reading subtitles with Japanese voices.
Ugh.
Um,
I don't mind a bit of cringy American language as long as I don't
yeah.
have to read it all. I'm perfectly happy with all the. It's obviously super cheesy, and I'm happy with that. And yeah, I'm not a big. I would not, and I still to this day wouldn't be a big fan of having to read all the English. To be honest, how about you?
Fair enough. The only real instances I've had is recently because they just released the Pokemon Origins anime, which is like this 4 episode series that goes over the story of the Pokemon Red and Blue games. And it's not like it's very different to the beginning of the original Pokemon anime series because it's based on the video game so closely, and it's really
That's
awesome.
cool.
I'd recommend you watch it because not only does it so closely follow that story, but it's also so much more gritty. Like it's relatively dark and it's much more interesting than the Pokemon anime. And it's only 4 episodes long. They're like 20 minutes each. They're all subtitled. You can
There's
find
Team
subtitled.
Rocket in it,
Nope. Actually, I guess Team Rocket are not like.
but it's Jesse and James in it.
No, they're not. They're not in it.
Okay,
Like
we're all good
it
then.
is. It is very much sticks rigidly to the story of the games. So
Team
that's
Rocket
cool.
goes blasting off again.
Yeah, I mean the main character is red. The main character is red, and his rival is green because it's Japanese. So it's red and green were the games released in Japan, and then blue was the one that came out in Europe and America. Yeah, and Professor Oak's in it. It's good stuff. It's really good. So if I were to say watch any anime right now, you could go do that. But there you go.
All right.
Okay. So
Cool.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. So this is from Toby Dale, and he says, "Hey guys, just wanted to give you a massive props for making such an enjoyable podcast. Discovered you guys by searching for Nintendo podcast one night and listened to all of them in a row." That's keen.
It's crazy.
As for a question, if you ran Nintendo, what would you put out this year? Thanks, guys. Look forward to the next one. Now, there's a couple of things I like to say about this guy, first of all. The first one is really well done on listening to all of them in a row. Like, I know we've only done 5 episodes, but, like, good effort.
I mean, I think at this point when he sent it, there was 4.
Okay, fair enough. That's true.
But that's 6 hours of content.
Absolutely. But the second thing I'd like to say about him is that this gentleman gave us a link to his YouTube channel. So I just was like, oh, I'll check out the link. And let me first of all plug his link before I say what it does. And that is that his link is youtube.com/director Toby. That's Toby spelled Toby. And so I just clicked on this thing, and I thought, wow, he's actually a YouTube director with quite a few thousand subscribers, and he's, he directs these random little videos, and I will attempt to describe a few of them, just now. But so the first one I saw, which is his most recent one, so it's the trench scene from Episode 4, A New Hope, at the end.
Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah, I should mention that, shouldn't I? And he sort of replaced Luke Skywalker with a baby.
Just so ridiculous.
And it's got like a helmet on its head, and it's just, that's all I can say about it, really. It's just a hilarious little video.
Awesome.
Absolutely. But yeah, so I guess we should get on with answering his question. So his
Yeah.
question was, if you ran Nintendo, what would you put out this year?
Yeah. Would be on the release schedule.
So are we
Well,
gonna do realistic or wish list or?
Uh, I mean, there's scope here. If we just say from what we know Nintendo has in the pipe right now, I would say try as much as you can to put out Smash this year. Smash needs to come out this year. It like Wii U is on life support, and Smash is one of those games that can bring it somewhat out of that pit. They have to get Smash out.
I think
I'm
it's
not
odds
sure.
on to come out this year.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, I think they've promised it for 2014, and I think that they should get it out. I think that X should be put out. Mario Kart's definitely coming out. And
And
there's
it
they
better be
haven't.
spring, not summer. Can I add?
Yeah, it better be because there's fucking nothing here. And then I think they haven't said anything on the new Yoshi's Epic Yarn or whatever that's going to be. Nothing, no word on that, but they should definitely try and push that out as well this year. Just, I mean, I would much prefer that the game was good and well developed and delayed for reasons that would make it better. But there comes a point where you will have zero things in your software lineup and you need everything right now. So all those need to come out. Anything you think I've missed there, or anything that was
I
unrealistic?
was gonna say that I think there will be something like Link Between Worlds from last year, where they basically announced it very early on in the year, and then it came out for Christmas.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And like I think that there will be something killer on probably 3DS that will fit that slot. Hopefully
Yeah.
Wii U as well, but that's probably asking too much. But I think that slot of, and we're coming up into the next few months where there's going to be probably a couple of Nintendo Directs, January, February, March as well, where I think that is a great slot to say this is what you can look forward to this holiday, and that's the first time you see that game, and then it comes out for Christmas and like end of November.
Yeah.
I would suggest obviously something like Advance Wars 2D Metroid, as F-Zero, as we've mentioned numerous times before. I think realistically, I'm unsure as to what it could be. Maybe one of those. You never know.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of pinpoint something right now. We know they have Zelda in the works that'll be shown off at E3, but there's no way in hell that's coming out this year. Not a chance. And
The problem is we'll see Zelda for the first time at E3, and that's just simply too late for holiday 2014.
yeah, definitely.
Whereas I think that if you want stuff to come out this year, your big window for keeping an eye on Nintendo would be, like I said, 3DS stuff in the next couple of Nintendo Directs.
Mhm.
But if I ran Nintendo, what would I put out this year? I would continue to just release awesome games for 3DS, and in my opinion, awesome games would be something along the lines of the ones I've already mentioned.
Yeah. I think that we may see this trend of Nintendo handing franchises off to other Japanese third-party developers continue, because if they want a broad lineup of software for the next year and they continue to not be able to hit the mark with a lot of their release dates, they're going to have to keep doing this. You know, we know that Hyrule Warriors is coming out this year, probably. There's going to be something else along those lines announced in a direct sometime, and I don't know which franchise they're going to hand off, but it's going to be a pretty important one, I think.
I mean, just talking about Directs, when will the next Direct be, do you think? Well, surely it'll be early February, mid-February?
Well, I think that the Link Between Worlds Direct, which also showed off the Xenoblade sequel and
Mm.
had loads of stuff in it, that was around mid-February, I believe, of last year. And it does seem like that's the slot where they like to put it. It's. I mean, last year they were in a position where they needed to show things off, and they still are in a position where they need to build excitement and hype, which to some degree means that they may again have a weaker showing at E3, because I feel like if they had kept all that information for E3, we would have had a much different impression of that conference overall, and probably been much more positive on it. But yeah, I definitely think the February slot is one that they are going to try and hit. So there you
Hope
go.
so.
Indeed. But I guess that's it. That's what we would put out for Nintendo, and hope that they can follow suit and do that. And that is going to be our final email. We have one more, which is from Nagi, that we will address in the future, but we don't have any others. So please continue to send your email questions, whatever, to nyppquestions@gmail.com, and we may take a break from that next week, unless we get enough that we can cover for a whole segment. But keep that going. Keep pushing those, and we'll be happy to read them.
Send them in.
Yes, indeed. So that's going to wrap up this section, and we will be right back at you with our final topic, discussing the woes and the problems with Nintendo currently.
And the positives for the future.
As we hope so, indeed. So we'll come back after this break, and be right back at you. See you in a second. And we are back with our final segment of the podcast, and this is it's an issue that needs to be addressed, and everyone's been talking about it, and you're probably sick to death of it by now if you are someone who listens to gaming podcasts, because it is a topic for discussion that everyone is jumping on, and that is Nintendo and what the hell they do with Wii U and where they go from here, honestly, because it seems like a really, really dire situation. So they recently posted NPD numbers where Nintendo did pretty horribly, and they had to basically reevaluate their sales forecasting for the end of fiscal year 2013, and they basically revised their 9 million Wii U target down to 2.8, which is a very significant drop. Not only that, but they said that they were changing their forecast from forecasting profit to a loss. I think something along the lines of 50 billion yen or $50 billion. I can't remember what currency it was. Profit down to losing 25 billion, which is a horrible swing, to be sure. And this will be the third year running that Nintendo has posted a loss as opposed to a profit, which they so normally do throughout their lifetime. So, what's going wrong? What are Nintendo doing wrong? We have a few points laid out. We're going to attack them. So, Bally, let's start off with marketing. And I think something that we should just hit straight away is the name of the system and the confusion that has brought to people. Just casual consumers. What's your opinion on the Wii U name and how it's been perceived?
I can see what they were trying to do. Their most successful home console of all time by an absolute mile, the Wii. Why would you not want to include that in the name? I can understand that logic entirely. The biggest issue I have is that the name's not different enough. The system isn't different enough. It's a white box. It uses Wiimotes. It's called the Wii, and people don't realize that. When I say people, I'm talking about the majority of people who bought a Wii, which are not Nintendo fans. They are not even necessarily video gaming fans. They're just people who wanted a good time. Wii Sports looked awesome. They bought a Wii, 180 quid, pounds, British monies, but those people do not look at the Wii U and think, I need that, in the same way they did for the Wii, and that's the biggest problem. And
I mean, it comes down to perception, really, and fundamental understanding of what the system is, because you have this issue where the system isn't defined as a as an advancement or anything new. People see the gamepad and they think that it is a new additional peripheral. I think this is something that needs to be brought up more often. Nintendo released a huge amount of peripherals for the Wii. I mean, the balance board, the Mario Kart wheel, the fucking Zelda crossbow thing. So many peripherals, and it is very easy for the casual consumer who sees Nintendo releasing all these peripherals over the years to just go, oh, it's another one of those. It's an extra added bonus thing that I can have for my already existing system. And I mean, a lot of the time they won't even go and find out that it's something new. They'll just accept that it's this peripheral and be like, I don't need that in my life. Why would I need that? I'm done with the Wii. I haven't played it in 5 years. It's sitting in a closet. There's no reason for me to go and get this. And that is a real problem, especially when it comes to advertising, because Nintendo haven't had any advertising, especially in terms of like TV campaigns or anything of that nature, even online. I mean, I go on the internet these days, and I am fucking bombarded with adverts for Xbox One. Every fucking site I go to has Xbox One pop-up ads. It's unbelievable. You can't escape them. Like, there is no way that it's not going to be in your mind. And Nintendo don't have mind share in that way. They don't have people, they don't have it shoved down their throats like they did with the Wii, for which they did a fantastic marketing campaign. But it's just not good enough, and that's really where they're falling short here.
I think that, like, we've talked a lot about sort of marketing to that mainstream, the non-gamer, the casual gamer, the Wii buyer, that person.
Right.
Right. So do you know Michael Pachter?
Yes, Pachter is very well known within the industry.
Absolutely. So I was actually watching a bit of him on YouTube, and I know he's quite controversial. But
he's hated by many Nintendo fans.
Okay, but there was one point he made about Nintendo fans I actually agreed with. I don't know what your opinion on this will be, but let me finish my point. And that is, he thinks that there are 30 million hardcore Nintendo fans out there. 30 million. No more, no less. He thinks that that's a rough number of people who love their Zelda, their Mario, their Metroid, their other Nintendo franchises. And he thinks they simply have mismarketed to them as well. And my point is that had Nintendo ignored the mainstream and even just tried to appeal to that 30 million, they could have sold 20 million, 15 over the lifetime, not like initially, but they could have sold way more Wii U's than they have right now.
That's yeah. No, I can totally understand that. It's essentially the numbers that GameCube sold.
Yeah, that's what he was effectively going off to some degree. Absolutely.
I mean, it's the people who stuck with Nintendo even in their darkest hour up to that point, which was GameCube, It's the people who kept buying. And the reason GameCube was such a success for the hardcore was because they were releasing those titles, which they have flat out ignored since the end of that generation,
And you can name Mario, Zelda, Metroid, Wave Race, stuff like that, F-Zero, new franchises at the time, Pikmin, multiples of some of those games on GameCube, and it sold not great, but it did what Pachter was suggesting, and that was appealing to the hardcore and selling appropriately. And if you're telling me that the Wii U in its lifetime will have Wave Race, F-Zero, multiple Metroid games, multiple Pikmin games, new franchises, Mario's, multiple Zeldas as well, I should add, then it feels like, how far down the line are we? 2 years down the line? We're not there. No. We're not on the same road. There were already 5 amazing games out on GameCube within the first little while. And I'm talking about stuff like Smash Brothers Melee, Luigi's Mansion, Rogue Squadron, Mario Kart, Double Dash, Sunshine. Stuff like that was already out. And it's just releasing those. We're not even talking about the mainstream right now. We're just talking about the hardcore. They're just not doing it.
It's very true, and lots of people look back on the GameCube with fond memories, and rightly so, because it was a fantastic system for people who care about Nintendo. And I feel that they could do that with the Wii U. Let's be honest, Nintendo systems are for Nintendo games. It has been like that since the N64. The last time that third parties were in any way relevant was Super Nintendo. And even then, there wasn't a huge Western presence. I don't think there's ever been a huge Western presence on any Nintendo console, because there's Japanese developers back then making majority of the games. And so we will always be in a situation where people in the industry say, oh, Nintendo need to court third parties. This is why they're going wrong. But look at the GameCube. The GameCube was not a distant third, but it was kind of similar with the Xbox in that generation. And it had a lot of similar third-party games, and that didn't work. The system was the same power level. The games were relatively similar across the board, and yet it still didn't sell the system. That's not why people bought it. I mean, there are standouts. For example, Soul Calibur 2. That was sold on the premise of having a Nintendo character being exclusive to it in that version. That's why it's the most successful version of that game, because Nintendo brands and franchises carry so much power that people are willing to invest in them. And, maybe that's something that they think will work with Hyrule Warriors. Maybe they're thinking, okay, this is a good thing. This is a third-party game that we can get behind and actually sell on our console. And that's really the only way. This is the only way they're going to get third parties onto Wii U. It's by giving their franchises off to them and allowing them to make games that are spin-offs or whatever based around these very well-known characters. Because people don't buy third-party games on Nintendo platforms. People want their stuff, their own brand, and that's how you do it, really. And that's why.
Do you think that giving third parties permission to use Nintendo characters is more important for selling systems than density of first-party titles released in the first couple of years is?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I think that it would be much better for them to have those high-quality Nintendo titles. The only reason that they're doing these is because they need stopgaps. They need something to fill the void, because otherwise there will be an empty void like there was at the beginning of 2013, where we're waiting for Pikmin 3, which supposedly was a launch window game that ended up coming out in August, end of July, was it? It was ridiculous. Like, this is not launch window. Hello? Are you kidding me? It was insanity. And they had this year head start. They had a whole year before the PS4 and Xbox One came out. They did not capitalize on it in any way, and that is utterly frustrating, because they could have had a nice footing, and they just didn't.
It feels like the company has changed so much in just our gaming lifetimes. Like, I'm talking about back to GameCube again. This Nintendo would never do something as risky as completely rehash the graphical system of Zelda. Like, Wind Waker, when it came out, was so controversial, but in the long run it actually worked out well.
Yeah.
And those risks of just new franchises, Pikmin, and we're just going to make loads of random little dudes run around in a garden, like a risk. It's a risk. And those are two examples of fantastic risks that paid off, and I'm still making them money down the line. We now have Wind Waker HD Remake, which is going to sell quite well, as is Pikmin 3, and those are both continued successes from original risks. They need new risks so that down the line they can continue to make the successes from the risks that should be coming out now.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely think that is a big issue, especially when you're talking about the way they launched Wii U with a game that is the fourth in a series that we have grown so sick of. It is so safe. It is it's agonizingly safe. And even when you come to something like Mario 3D World, it's just an iteration.
As much as we love it, it's safe.
It's far too safe, and that's their problem. People like Nintendo a lot of the time because they do crazy, ridiculous things, and they have these ideas. A lot of them will fail, but they're very big successes in there and gems that people hold on to and really adore. And they don't have those. It's really risk averse. It's mind-boggling, really. I would love for them to just change that up completely, but it's hard.
It's either we need a new franchise I'm talking about announcements. We either need a new Nintendo franchise announced this year, or we need a reinventing of an original one. I mean, for example, a new Metroid, we talk about this way too much, but a new 2D Metroid, let's say they announced one. I bet you it would look so different. They could reinvent it somehow compared to Fusion, Zero Mission, Super Metroid. Because there's been such a time gap and that technology has evolved. There's so much they could change, and like Wind Waker was an evolution from Ocarina, and Majora's Mask. There's so much risk that can be taken, and safe risk, like good innovations, good ideas, new ideas.
And I mean, I think Nintendo is predicated on that idea of safe risk, as you put it, because they don't necessarily branch out in terms of franchises anymore, but they take risks within those franchises.
Yeah.
Like Zelda was well established, but they did something completely different with it in Wind Waker and just threw caution to the wind, to pun completely, and did that, which is pretty fantastic. But yeah, okay, so we've talked a lot about that. Let's talk about the controller. There hasn't been any real reason for its existence, like aside from the fact that you can use it for off-TV play, and then there's some cool stuff in Nintendo Land. No other software, barring like ZombieU, has really, justified that purchase and why there's the extra additional cost. I know you wanted to bring up the point about Miiverse. There.
Yeah, it was a relatively simple point. I thought that was basically that there's already existing games, 3D World, for example. You finish your level and you have the opportunity to post on Miiverse. Had the gamepad not been there, you can't post on Miiverse, or you perhaps possibly could, but if you're playing 3D World without the pad and just say Wiimote Nunchuck, for example, you just can't post on Miiverse.
Yeah.
And you can't view other posts on Miiverse. And like, I think the suggestion overall that dropping the gamepad is in any way an idea is completely wrong. I think that all the ideas we have suggested so far about innovation, new ideas, rehashing old ideas in new ways even, all require the gamepad. The gamepad is a great device. It works well. They just don't have the content that has used it. The idea of dropping the gamepad is just reinforcing all the negatives we were just saying before. How easy would it be to come out with another 2D Mario if you drop the gamepad? Why not have a new 2D Mario that does something new with the gamepad? Or even a new Zelda well, I'm sure Zelda they're striving to make work with the gamepad. But the issue is that don't change the system. Keep the gamepad. It's good. Off TV play is cool, and I'm not even really want to mention off TV play because I don't think that's the selling point. The selling point is the potential new ideas that they can develop with the gamepad, that they can appeal to that hardcore, that 30 million we were talking about earlier, and sell some systems because they just need the content, they need the innovation, and they have it, but they just need to use it.
Yeah. No, it's a hard thing to grapple with, especially when there's kind of a precedent set that Nintendo may drop the gamepad owing to the 2DS. Like, 2DS is a very different matter, I would say, because it's not as integrated as the gamepad is with the Wii U.
I agree, but I still think it's sad because that was a great innovation. Out of all this negative stuff we've been talking about, the 3DS and the idea of 3D, fantastic innovation that worked. So to take that away was a shame, but at the same time, there are obviously reasons why they did it, and the 3DS isn't by no means selling badly. So
I think they're still going to support it, undoubtedly, but it's just.
You think over the next 2 years, 3 years, there will still be 3DS with 3D?
Oh, definitely. I definitely think that will. But it's just a shame that there is that precedent there that it potentially could happen. So another point is if you take away the controller, then there's even less there to tell the casual market that this is a new system, because you're still using Wii remotes and you're still using nunchucks and bringing back old peripherals. And oh my god, the commercials, like the adverts that they've had for Wii U have been horrible in communicating a message that this is a new system, because you have people on the couch still holding Wii remotes. It's fucking it's just frustrating as all hell. It just sends the wrong message to the consumer, and it just needs to be gotten rid of. I'm all for backwards compatibility, but taking those and bringing them back to use in games again is just like it's one step too far. I really think it's
Ultimately,
a problem.
surely the Wii brand has died out, and that any future home console, um, if they could rename it tomorrow, they would, kind of argument. Like,
Mm.
the Wii, people associate Wii with 6 years ago. It's not a thing now. If you go up to some randomer on the street and talk about Wii, there's no way that they think you're talking about Wii U. They think you're talking about Wii Sports, not much else. And
Yeah,
that's an issue that they just completely miscalculated.
yeah, definitely. It's horrible brand awareness. Like, I mean, yeah, you made the point at the beginning. Like, they wanted to keep that name, but they didn't go about it in the right way. They didn't go about it in the right way at all. I also think that there's this stigma. There is a very large stigma that the name Wii has among hardcore gamers in general, to the point at which they don't even want to put money towards something like that just because it is associated with that brand. And it's horrible situation. Um, but yeah, I mean, those are a lot of the things they've done wrong. We can talk about those till the cows come home and just be negative. But
We had a few suggestions in there, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, there are things that Nintendo could do potentially to help out the situation and maybe make things better. This is something I haven't typed out yet, but a lot of people talking about the leveraging of the back catalog and the virtual console, and the idea, recently PlayStation Now was announced, and the idea of the streaming service and having a subscription-based thing to virtual console. Do you think that something like that is a large enough draw to certain people to make the Wii U, a success in some way?
Like I've said already, that 30 million that are supposedly out there who are Nintendo fans love nostalgia. They love those classic Nintendo games. They're happy to drop money for those classic Nintendo games. But there's a couple of caveats. First caveat, they actually have to be on the systems. Nintendo actually has to put them on the system, on 3DS, on Wii U. They need to be a reasonable price, and there needs to be lots of them, and they need to be from new systems like the GBA, the game. Well, I say new in terms of virtual console. They need to be GBA, they need to be GameCube, and they need to be soon, because there's so much great content out there that can be linked to. We talked earlier about rehashing Metroid. What if all the Metroid games suddenly came out in the upcoming months before a new Metroid game they announced? It's really simple ideas, but
Yeah, they did stuff like that on the Wii. Like, before Excite Truck came out, they released Excite Bike on the Virtual Console and
yeah,
had that kind of hype build up towards the new release.
they do it in such small doses that just make it bigger and grander. And
Yeah.
the second caveat I was going to point out was link the accounts between 3DS and Wii U. I know everyone has said this, and I'm just repeating what millions have said out there, but like the idea of buying, for example, Metroid Zero Mission, there we go, GBA game. The ability to play the same save file between your Wii U gamepad and your 3DS on the go, perhaps, would just be great. And I'm not a tech wizard, but surely they have the technology, the existing technology, 3DS, Wii U, that could unify an account like that.
They do. And they're definitely working on it. They've made steps towards it with the unified wallet system, and you now have Nintendo Network IDs and Miiverse on 3DS and Wii U, and that's great because it's all cross-platform now. Miiverse works, and you can post to Wii U communities from 3DS. You can post to 3DS communities from Wii U. There's that cross-compatibility going on. But yeah, I mean, Sony already does it with Vita and PS3 and now PS4. But I think that Nintendo could leverage it in a much, much better way.
Because
just because
they're
of the
the king
strength
of handhelds.
and the
They're
strength
the
of their
ones with all the
franchises.
3DS. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm just saying that they have much stronger, much more well-regarded franchises that can easily be, put across both systems. They also mentioned, it was a Nintendo Direct like sometime last year, GBA games were coming to Wii U, which was a weird announcement because why would you announce that for Wii U and not 3DS? And I think, and I have a strong suspicion that the case will be that will be the first kind of platform which will be cross-compatible, will be GBA games that they'll be playable on both the Wii U gamepad and on 3DS, and then they'll expand outwards from there. But there's definitely a way that they could do it to make it easier for everyone. And Nintendo are internet averse, as we know, because they don't understand what to do when it comes to online. But yeah, they could easily get this sorted and into place. It's just the matter of doing it sooner rather than later, because there will come a point where people won't see it relevant anymore and won't, even if they wanted it at some point, the time will have passed and it will be gone.
The time has passed to some degree, because there's been these first 2 years of Wii U where there's been an eShop that's been okay, there's been bits and bobs that are nice. It's great that they're now doing fully downloadable titles, but as in like retail games. But
Yes,
it's a
yeah.
shame that they have such a massive back catalogue that didn't just appear day one. Why not day one? Like, come on. I mean, maybe that's too much to ask, but day one, you have such a big back catalogue with Nintendo fans dying for like some classic games to play, and they just need to be out there.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
I can
So,
think of 5 to 10 games I'd happily download tomorrow if they appeared, for example, and
instantly,
that's
yeah.
money that I have that I'm willing to give to them, and I don't think I'm alone, and I think that's
No,
a shame.
yeah, it's a shame. But I guess aside from that, that this is a subject which I don't like talking about because I think it is a fucking horrible idea. But it's the idea of Nintendo putting their games, franchises, whatever, onto phones, onto mobile platforms, most notably iOS, and leveraging that market. And there were comments from Iwata in the recent, whatever, I can't remember what it was that I guess. Press release that they made, where he said, they're looking at changing their business model, and people speculating that perhaps this means leveraging iPhones or Android phones in some way. Do you think that this is even a remote possibility, Bali, and that they would go down this road?
I think it is a possibility for similar reasons as to why they made the Wii and Wii Sports and that whole casual audience. I mean, I personally wouldn't like to do that. I happily admit that I prefer GameCube to Wii as a system. I think that Nintendo can run a successful business based upon hardcore audience on both home console and 3DS without having to appeal to the mainstream. And I think it would be against that idea by going on iOS, and I think there was someone on Weekend Confirmed who suggested it a while ago, but they had quite a good idea that I did quite like, but overall don't like the general reasons behind it. But he was suggesting, I can't remember who it was, I'm afraid, but he was suggesting that there could be some sort of funky add-on that you actually plugged into an iPad or an iPhone, and it was like a little NES controller, and with that NES controller you would play like classic NES games on your iPad slash iPhone. And I thought that was a pretty neat idea, but that we know that that's not what Nintendo would do if they ever did go on iOS, and I'm split on this one. I don't think they will do it, but you never know.
No. Well, I feel like they could potentially make use of iOS in ways that aren't necessarily putting their games on the system. I mean, let's take for example, it's funny because there already technically is Nintendo content on the iPhone, because the Pokemon Company in Japan have released an app on iOS, on Android, which is basically a Pokédex app, and you can download it. It's an officially Nintendo licensed thing, and it's available on the eShop, and things like that, like a Pokédex and stuff like I don't know what else and what other franchises they would do this with, but having specific apps there that are using the platform and giving them an additional revenue stream that isn't necessarily just going out and putting all their games and virtual console back catalog on there. I think there are other ways to leverage the platform which could help them without kind of diminishing their brands. So I guess another point that we could bring up is independent developers indies and how it seems right now that Sony is the king of indies. They're supporting them heavily and pushing them for PS4 and being like, we are well behind these guys and they're great. Nintendo actually doing a very similar job to Sony. They have a lot of indies on board right now, and I think if they really push them and make a lot of indies come to their platform, they almost don't need third-party developers on their side, because if you have a steady release of independent content coming alongside those flagship Nintendo AAA games, then you should have enough to keep the console chugging along. I don't necessarily think that you need all that support if you have the indies there, just in droves. What do you think about this, Bally?
I'm not personally a massive indie gamer, as you probably know, but yeah, that'd be great. No, absolutely, and I do think I have looked at the 3DS eShop, and obviously you've played a number of indie games from that eShop, and that is good quality content that actually sold really well. What was that game? The 2D Western shooter.
Do you mean Steamworld Dig or Dylan's Rolling Western?
No, was it Dylan's Rolling Western?
Gunman Clive.
Gunman Clive, exactly. No, Gunman Clive. I mean, that is, for example, it sold really well on 3DS, didn't it?
Yeah, no. Apparently, according
compared to the Steam version.
Well, I'm not sure on numbers. I assumed the Steam version would sell a lot more because just a much wider. I mean,
but didn't it come out first on 3DS or something?
So it came out first. Interestingly, it came out first on iOS.
Oh, I know.
And a game like that is a precision platformer and requires D-pad and buttons, and virtual controls wouldn't really work on that kind of game, and he didn't see a huge amount. I mean, as a single guy who developed this game, I believe, didn't see a huge amount of success on the iOS App Store, and he brought it to 3DS, and it took off, and loads of people loved it and enjoyed it, and that game did really well for him there. So I definitely think that it is a place where indies can do well and make a lot of good money there. So I fully support Nintendo getting behind them, and I think it's a good thing to do. And I think that it is a very healthy ecosystem to have. And another point I want to bring up is Nintendo are so important to so many individuals in the indie community, because if you think about the kind of games that independent developers make, so many of them are like puzzle platformers or Metroid style games, or kind of Zelda style, like Binding of Isaac is a Zelda style game, Super Meat Boy, all these games that are inspired by classic Nintendo games. A lot of indie developers are really hardcore Nintendo fans, and Nintendo would do well to court those guys and be like, we know you love our stuff, come work with us, and maybe you'd be able to leverage some of our franchises as well. I think that would be fantastic, and they should go after them in droves. Get behind those guys. But yeah, I mean, that's all we really have time to talk about now. We could probably go on for quite a while about this, but we do have to.
I'm sure we will in the future.
We definitely will, but it's definitely a subject that is contentious and a really interesting discussion.
And if you disagree with us, tell us.
Yeah, we'd really be interested to hear from you guys. What do you think Nintendo should do? If you want to send those opinions, you can, of course, do that, as always, to the email address, Bally, which is
NYPPQuestions@gmail.com.
And we await them eagerly. But that is indeed going to close out the show for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, be sure to keep sending your listener mail. We'll try and come up with some more segments for the near future. We're planning on doing a Wii retrospective, which will probably be a longer segment, maybe an hour or so, where we look back at the entirety of the lifespan of the Wii and talk about that. So that's to look forward to at some point in the future, and many more episodes to come. But before we go, let's plug ourselves. Bally, do you want to go ahead and let people know your Twitters and your Miiverse?
So yeah, follow me on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91. That's a 91, not a written out 91. And I have recently just connected my Wii U online in London, where I am studying currently. So yeah, follow me on Miiverse. I will respond to your follows with a follow back, most likely. And yeah, I'm you can see what I'm playing and fun things like that. So yeah, follow me. That'd be great.
Excellent. I am at Lordnbz on Twitter. Same goes for Miiverse, and you can have a look at what we're doing, and we'll make posts throughout the weeks, and you can see what we're doing. But that is going to be it for our show this week, and we will see you guys very soon in the next couple of weeks for another show. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.